What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Average Bros Media. My name is Nick, and for those of you who are new to the channel, thank you so much for subscribing. I absolutely love seeing our subscribers grow each and every week and look forward to continuing to make content to share with you guys. Now today we're here at the University of Washington, where I graduated from a little over a year ago to film a video that is long overdue. Today we're going to introduce the 2005 Legacy GT Wagon. Now we've done a lot with this car on the channel already, so it's time to share with you guys a little bit more about this car. I want to talk to you about how did I end up with this car, what's been done to it so far, what future plans do I have, and just show it off a little bit. So let's start with that. Alright, let's talk a little bit about how I ended up with this car, because it's actually a pretty great story. So as any 17-year-old Subaru fanboy, of course I wanted an STI. So I had saved up a bunch of money, I was shopping around, and started looking at these cars, which brought us to looking into insurance. And that's where it went downhill quickly. Insurance was about $400 a month for a 17-year-old to drive an STI. Obviously that wasn't feasible at the time, not that it would be feasible now even, but it set me looking in another direction. And at that time, my grandpa was selling his 2006 Legacy 2.5i Wagon. It wasn't really anywhere close to the STI, didn't have a manual transmission, it wasn't turbocharged, but it was a great car, it was still a Subaru, and I had to pick it up. So I picked that car up, and the first thing I wanted to do was install a stereo system into it. Now, any of you familiar with the Legacy platform probably know where I'm going with this. For whatever reason, Subaru thought it would be a good idea to have the stock stereo and HVAC unit all be one piece that are connected, which makes it kind of hard to install a doubled-in stereo into the car. And the only solution, which I found out through a little bit of research on the forums, was a $400 kit from Japan. Yeah, $400. That was a tough pill to swallow. But I should have known that that was just the start of things. As I started to surf around on the Legacy forum a little bit more, I found out that there was a turbocharged manual wagon version of my Legacy. That was much closer to the original STI that I wanted, and that's where I got myself in trouble. Started looking around on Craigslist a little bit, trying to find one of these cars for sale locally to go check out. Nothing was really popping up, and I started to realize how rare these cars were. For those of you who aren't familiar, there's about 1,000 of these cars across the US that are a wagon with manual and have the limited package that includes sunroof and leather interior. So I was looking all across the US at that point. I found one in Maine and was going to have a car inspection done on it and have the car actually shipped to me. Well, unbeknownst to me, the car dealership sold it the day before the inspection was scheduled, and I was back to ground zero. At that time, this car popped up locally about 30 minutes from my house, and I knew I had to go check it out. Well, my mom wasn't super on board with this plan. My dad, being a guy, was a little bit interested and wanted to go check it out, so sorry, Mom. We went and checked it out the very next day and brought it home the day after that. So, nice little surprise in the garage when my mom came home. That's a story for another time. But I began researching more and more on these cars, obviously installed a stereo into this one again, Spent way too much time on the forums, and this thing very, very quickly became a money pit, but it's absolutely my baby. That brings us to where we are today, so let's talk a little bit about what's been done to the car. So let's start out with my favorite modifications that I've done to the car, and that would be the performance modifications. Fully agree, I think life's too short to stay stock, and after all, if you don't have a little bit of extra added performance, what are you doing? So, to start off, we have a Grimsby thermal coated top mount intercooler up top here. I believe this is the largest top mount intercooler made for these cars. It can fit in the stock location. Absolutely love the quality of Grimsby products. I obviously have a lot of it on the car. Highly recommend it. I've got a Grimsby intake over here connected to a Perrin turbo inlet that goes back to a VF52. For those of you who aren't familiar, the VF52 is the stock turbo off of a 2011 through 14 WRX. I'll probably talk more about that turbo on the Legacy in particular in another video, but I will say that this is absolutely the turbo that should have come on this car. It's a great upgrade over the VF40 that comes on this car stock. Now from there, I have a Grimsby up pipe with a external wastegate. The wastegate is a tile 38mm routed to atmosphere. That thing absolutely rips when it opens up. It's unreal. If you haven't ridden in a car with an external wastegate, I highly recommend it. From there, we've got a Grimsby 3-port electronic boost controller. Replaced the fuel rails with IAG CNC fuel rails. Replaced the TGVs with a IAG TGV Delete in black. Replaced the injectors with an ID1000. Upgraded the fuel pump to a Deutschwerk 65C fuel pump. Have a Coyote all aluminum racing radiator. And I believe that covers most of the performance parts. Exhaust wise, it's a CNT catted downpipe that was on the car when I got it. I'll probably switch that out with some future mods. And the exhaust is a Greddy Evo 2 catback. Now, that brings up, you're probably going to wonder what kind of power is this car putting down. Now, I had this car tuned by Cobb Tuning Surgeline in Portland about almost 2 years ago now. And when I had it tuned, it was my daily driver. That's kind of how I built this whole setup, was to be, a reliable street car. It's not my daily driver anymore, so I have a few mods that I'd like to do to switch it up, get a little bit more power. But the setup as is currently makes about 309 horsepower to the wheels and 333 torque. So plenty of horsepower for a street car. It feels absolutely phenomenal. Really, really a great setup. The way it feels and the reliability that I've seen from it over the last 2 years makes me hesitant to change it. But I think we'll cross that bridge when we get there. That covers most of the performance mods. As you can see, there's some Grimsby engine dress up here. I've got a Grimsby heat shield over the turbo, and a Grimsby master cylinder brace. So we'll cover some of the suspension stuff that I did here. The Grimsby master cylinder brace was added shortly after I did the Brembo install, just to provide a little bit more support there. But I'm going to do a separate video on that and just kind of give you my full rundown and thoughts on how that part benefits the car. So before I even touch the engine, any of the parts that we just talked about, the first thing I did to this car was work on the suspension and the handling. Now if you've ever driven a stock Legacy, you know that the stock suspension leaves a lot to be desired. So the first thing I did was lower the car on some Swift springs with Coney strut inserts. Gave it a nice lowered ride height, not too low that you're bottoming out over everything, but it also handles phenomenally. From there, I paired that with a 25mm Perrin sway bar front and rear with Perrin polyurethane end links and Evo support brackets in the rear. Now, with the added power that we got with the engine build, went ahead and swapped on the Brembos for a little bit more stopping power. These are Brembos off of a 2004 STI front and rear, and those are paired with the DBA Club Spec 4000 series rotors, as well on the front and rear. Hawk HPS 5.0 pads and stainless steel brake lines all around. The wheels are an NK 18x8.5 Rigine. They've been on the car for a while now. I love the look of it, but I think this spring will be time to mix it up and try something else. And the tires are a Michelin Pilot Sport all season. When I bought them, this car was my daily driver, so I'll definitely be going for a dedicated summer setup come this spring. Do a quick walk around of all the exterior parts that have been modified on the car. So as you may have seen in a recent video, the whole front end was swapped out for a JDM Spec B bumper. It's a JDM honeycomb grille with an STI lip from Japan. All the fog lights and a few of the parts behind it, crash beam and whatnot, are all replaced as well. A while ago I blacked out the headlights, removed the amber from them, and did a full HID retrofit on those guys as well. Towards the side of the car has JDM spats on the front and rear. We'll go ahead and walk around and see what's been done to the rear. So the rear end of the car is mostly still stock. The one major modification would be these taillights that are JDM taillight off of the Rev DF model Legacy. I've got a few more things I want to do to the rear end to really pull it together and kind of get the look that I'm going for, but we're going to go ahead and keep those a secret. I think they're going to be some nice unique parts that really pull the car together. So that brings us to the interior modifications to the car, and I have to say I think the interior overall is probably my favorite part of the car. Primarily for the reason that I've done a lot to the interior to make it like truly my own, and some of the modifications, I think my Legacy is the only one with these modifications done, so let's go ahead and hop in. So I think the interior in my Legacy has by far seen the most dramatic change since I bought this car. The reason being is that this car had a tan interior stock, and if you've ever seen the tan interior in these Legacies, it's god-awful. So I knew that had to go one day. Didn't really realize what that was going to take to make it happen, but what I ended up doing was swapping out the tan interior for a 2008 Spec B interior. And the Spec B interior is a leather and Alcantara option. Now, easier said than done. Given that this car had tan interior, it had tan everything, and I'm talking interior trim pieces, carpet, seat belts, everything. All that had to be swapped out. So before I even started thinking about just putting the seats in, I stripped the interior down, replaced it with all black pieces, the carpet, again, seat belts, the trim pieces under the dash, up all the pillars, everything to make it black to match the Spec B interior, and then started figuring out how to make that Spec B interior work. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Spec B only came in a sedan option, so the rear seat is entirely different. I had to have a custom piece reupholstered for the upright portion of the rear seat to make that work in this car, and then the front seats were a whole nother story. Between 05 and 09, or 08 is what my interior was. Between 05 and 08, the occupancy sensor in the seats, particularly the passenger, changed. So I had to swap the bases over from my 05 seats to make it work in this car, to have no airbag lights and make sure everything was functioning properly. Obviously a lot of work, but overall I think the end result really speaks for itself. It's a very unique modification. As of right now, it's the only Legacy wagon that I know of in the United States that has Spec B interior in it. And for me, it's what really pulls the whole car together. And knowing all the work that went into it, it just means, you know, a lot to me, and is really a piece that I'm proud of in this car. As far as other modifications that I've done to the interior to kind of pull it together with the Spec B interior, we have a damn D-shaped steering wheel, which I did an install video on, so if you have any trouble or want to know how that install goes, check that out. This particular one is again the D-shape with the red stitching. We did the e-brake boot and shift boot in leather with perforated leather and red stitching to match it all together, and tie it in with the Cobb shift knob that has a red ring on it. Replaced all of the pedals down below with the Spec B pedals to match the interior, and have a Pro Sport dead pedal to match that as well. Last real piece of the modifications to the interior would be this JDM piece that we talked about earlier, and how I actually ended up with this car. So really bringing it full circle here. The car does have a full Pioneer surround sound system, double din head unit with Bluetooth audio and Bluetooth phone. All the speakers have been replaced. There's component speakers up front, new speakers in the rear doors. We dynamounted the full doors to get a little bit better sound dampening and quiet the car down on the highway. Have 2 amps in the back powering the speakers and 1 powering the sub separately. There's a 10-inch sub back there. But overall, just again, adds to the appeal of this car for me, is having a nice sound system that I can enjoy on road trips like we did with the Express Rally. You know, driving my car and listening to some of my favorite music really doesn't get much better than that. I did wrap these 2 pieces here, the center shift surround and the JDM piece, in a satin black to really tie it in with the rest of the interior. But that pretty much wraps up all the interior modifications. That's gonna do it for this week's video. I hope you guys really enjoyed getting to meet the Legacy in more detail. After all, this is my baby, so I love getting to share it with you guys and fellow enthusiasts. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button down below. We've got more awesome content coming for you guys, starting with a badass 240 review next weekend, and a few more car reviews after that. More Legacy content. It's only getting better from here, so please, again, hit that subscribe button. Check us out on Instagram at AverageBrosMedia, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.